The stagecoach wheels ground to a halt outside the dusty station in Concordia, Kansas. And Natalie Owens knew her old life had finally ended, buried beside her sister in the cold Massachusetts ground 3 months prior. She descended carefully, her black morning dress collecting the prairie dust that seemed to coat everything in this small cattle town. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly, so different from the mild springs back home. Her leather traveling bag felt impossibly heavy as she stood on the wooden platform, scanning the handful of faces gathered there. None of them looked particularly welcoming, and she felt her heart sink lower than it already had, which seemed impossible given the depth of her grief. "Miss Owens." A deep voice cut through her thoughts. Natalie turned to find a tall man approaching, hat in his hands. He had to be in his late 20s, with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of winter sky. Everything about him spoke of hard work and honest living, from his worn but clean clothes to the calluses she noticed when he extended his hand. "I'm Fletcher Winters," he said. "We've been corresponding." She took his hand briefly, the warmth of it startling against her cold fingers despite the heat. "Mr. Winters. Yes, I remember your letters." Those letters had been practical, straightforward, nothing like the flowery correspondence she'd heard other mail-order brides received. He'd been honest about needing help on his ranch, about the isolation, about the hard work. She'd been honest too, or as honest as she could be through pen and paper, though she hadn't told him about Emily. Hadn't told him. She was answering his advertisement not out of hope for a new beginning, but because she couldn't bear to stay in a place where every corner held memories of her sister. Fletcher studied her face for a long moment, and she wondered what he saw there. The grief was surely written in every line, every shadow under her eyes from sleepless nights. "Your letters mentioned you were coming from Boston." "Just outside of it," she said quietly. "A small town you wouldn't know." He nodded slowly, placing his hat back on his head. "I've got the wagon just over here. It's about an hour's ride to the ranch. We can stop at the general store first if you need anything." "No, thank you. I'd just like to get there if that's acceptable." "Of course." He picked up her bag with an ease that suggested it weighed nothing, and gestured toward a well-maintained wagon with 2 sturdy horses. "I know this is all strange for you. Moving to a new place, agreeing to marry someone you've never met. I want you to know there's no pressure. We can take things slow." Natalie climbed onto the wagon seat, arranging her skirts carefully. "Your letters said you needed a wife to help with the ranch." "I do," Fletcher said, settling beside her and taking up the reins. "But I need someone who wants to be here more than I need the help. If you find this isn't what you're looking for, I'll make sure you're taken care of, help you get wherever you want to go." The kindness in his words made her throat tight. She'd expected many things from this arrangement, but genuine consideration hadn't been one of them. "That's very generous." They rode in silence for a while, the landscape opening up before them in endless rolling plains. Natalie had never seen so much open space, and despite her grief, she felt something stir in her chest at the sight of it. There was a freedom here, a vastness that made her feel small in a way that was almost comforting. "It's beautiful," she said finally. Fletcher glanced at her, surprise flickering across his face. "Most folks from back east find it too empty." "Sometimes empty is what you need." The words came out before she could stop them, and she immediately regretted the revelation. But Fletcher just nodded. "I've felt that way myself a time or two." The ranch appeared gradually, first as a distant structure, then resolving into a well-built house with a barn, several outbuildings and fenced pastures where cattle grazed. It was larger than Natalie had expected, clearly the product of years of hard work. "It's not fancy," Fletcher said as they approached, "but it's solid. Built most of it myself with help from my foreman, Miguel, and the other hands. It's lovely, Natalie said, and meant it. There was something honest about the place, something real that appealed to her despite herself. Fletcher helped her down from the wagon, his hands steady at her waist. She caught a scent of leather and clean sweat, entirely different from the perfumed gentleman she'd known back home. "I'll show you inside. I've got a woman from town, Mrs. Cassidy, who comes out twice a week to help with cleaning and such. She prepared your room. Your room. Not our room." Natalie felt a rush of relief. "Thank you." The inside of the house was simple but comfortable. The main room held a large fireplace, a worn sofa, and a dining table with 6 chairs. The kitchen was well stocked, clearly belonging to someone who knew how to care for himself. Fletcher led her down a short hallway. "This was meant to be a guest room," he said, opening a door to reveal a modest bedroom with a brass bed, a dresser, and a window overlooking the pastures. "I thought you might want your own space, at least for now. My room's at the other end of the hall." Natalie set her small bag on the bed, running her hand over the quilt. Someone had taken care with this room, and she suspected it had been Fletcher himself despite his mention of Mrs. Cassidy. "It's perfect. I'll let you rest," Fletcher said, backing toward the door. "We usually eat around 6. Nothing fancy, but there's plenty. If you need anything before then, just holler." After he left, Natalie sank onto the bed and finally allowed herself to feel the weight of the journey. She was nearly 2,000 miles from home, about to marry a stranger, and the grief she'd been carrying sat on her chest like a physical weight. Emily would have found this whole thing wildly romantic, would have spun stories about the handsome rancher and the adventure of it all. But Emily was gone, and Natalie was here alone, trying to figure out how to keep breathing. A knock on her door startled her sometime later. "Miss Owens, supper's ready if you're hungry." Natalie stood, smoothing her dress and checking her reflection in the small mirror above the dresser. She looked pale and drawn, but there was nothing to be done about it. She joined Fletcher in the dining room where he'd set out a simple meal of beef stew, fresh bread, and coffee. "I'm not much of a cook," he admitted as they sat down, "but I managed to keep myself fed." The stew was actually quite good, hearty and flavorful. Natalie realized she was hungrier than she'd thought. "Did you grow up ranching?" "Not exactly. My father was a shopkeeper in Missouri, but I always wanted this life, saved up and came out here about 8 years ago when I was 20. Started with 50 head of cattle and a lot of dreams." He smiled slightly. "Still got the dreams, and now I've got about 300 head. That's impressive. It's been hard work. Good work, though, the kind that means something." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I know from your letters you've had some recent difficulty. I don't mean to pry, but if there's anything you need to talk about, I'm willing to listen." Natalie set down her spoon, her appetite suddenly gone. "My sister died 3 months ago, pneumonia. She was only 21. The silence that followed felt heavy. Fletcher leaned back in his chair, his expression somber. "I'm real sorry for your loss. Were you too close?" "She was my only family after our parents passed. We were everything to each other." Natalie's voice cracked. "I couldn't stay there anymore. Everywhere I looked, I saw her. I needed to go somewhere completely different. So you answered my advertisement." "Yes. I'm sorry if that's not what you wanted to hear. You deserve someone who's coming here with hope instead of just trying to escape." Fletcher shook his head slowly. "I asked for honesty in my advertisement. Seems to me you're giving me that. Besides, sometimes running away is just another word for starting over." His words settled something inside her, a small knot of anxiety loosening. "Thank you for understanding." "We've all got our reasons for being where we are," Fletcher said. "And we've all got our pain. No shame in that. They finished their meal in more comfortable silence, and afterward, Fletcher showed Natalie around the ranch in the fading evening light. He introduced her to Miguel Rodriguez, his foreman, a weathered man in his 50s who greeted her with courteous warmth. Two other ranch hands, young men named Tommy and Sam, tipped their hats respectfully before heading to the bunkhouse. "They're good men," Fletcher said as they walked back toward the house. "Been with me for years. Miguel especially, he knows this ranch as well as I do." "It's clear you've built something good here," Natalie said, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "You must be proud." "Proud enough to want to share it with someone. That's why I placed that advertisement." He stopped, turning to face her. "But I want you to know there's no rush on the marriage part. I know it's customary to do it right away, but if you need time, we've got plenty of it." Natalie looked up at him, this stranger who was showing her more consideration than seemed reasonable. "People in town will talk. Let them. I've never paid much mind to gossip, and I don't intend to start now. You're grieving, and that deserves respect. When you're ready, if you're ready, we'll make it official. Until then, you're a guest here and you're safe." That night, lying in the unfamiliar bed with prairie sounds drifting through her window, Natalie felt the tears come for the first time since arriving. She cried quietly into her pillow, mourning Emily, mourning the life she'd left behind, mourning the girl she'd been before loss had changed her. But underneath the grief, there was something else, small and tentative. It might have been relief. The next morning, Natalie woke to sunlight streaming through her window and the sound of activity outside. She dressed quickly, choosing a simpler day dress in gray, and made her way to the kitchen. Fletcher was already gone, but he'd left coffee warming on the stove and a note saying to help herself to anything she needed. She spent the morning exploring the house more thoroughly, taking stock of what was there and what might be needed. The place was clean but Spartan, clearly the domain of a man who cared more for function than decoration. By noon, she'd made a list of things that could improve the space, small touches that would make it feel more like a home. Fletcher returned for lunch, dusty and tired but smiling when he saw she'd made sandwiches. "You didn't have to do that. I wanted to. I can't just sit idle." She poured him coffee. "I hope you don't mind, but I went through the house a bit, tried to get my bearings." "It's your house too, or it will be. Change anything you like." They ate together, and Fletcher told her about the work he'd been doing, checking fences and moving cattle to fresh pasture. Natalie found herself genuinely interested, asking questions about the ranch operation. Fletcher seemed pleased by her curiosity, explaining things with patience and detail. "If you're interested, you could come out with me sometime," he offered. "See the operation up close. It's not easy work, but it might help you understand what we do here." "I'd like that," Natalie said, surprising herself. The days began to form a pattern. Fletcher would rise early and work until midday, come back for lunch, then return to work until evening. Natalie gradually took over the cooking, finding satisfaction in preparing meals for the household. Mrs. Cassidy came twice a week as promised, a bustling woman in her 50s who was friendly but not intrusive. "Mr. Winters is a good man," Mrs. Cassidy said one afternoon as they worked together in the kitchen. "Been trying to find him a wife for years, all us ladies in town. Glad he finally took matters into his own hands." "How long have you known him?" Natalie asked. "Since he came to Concordia. My husband runs the feed store, so we've done plenty of business together. Fletcher's always been fair, always kept his word. Some of the other ranchers around here, they're harder men, but Fletcher's got a gentle way about him despite being tough as nails." Natalie absorbed this, adding it to her growing understanding of the man she'd agreed to marry. Every day revealed something new about Fletcher Winters. The way he was unfailingly patient with his horses. How he always thanked Miguel and the other hands for their work. The careful way he spoke to her, never pushing, never demanding. 2 weeks after her arrival, Fletcher made good on his promise to show her the ranch operation. He had Miguel saddle a gentle mare named Rosie and helped Natalie mount, his hands firm and steady. "You ride?" he asked. "A little. It's been a while." Back home, she and Emily had occasionally ridden in the countryside, but that felt like a lifetime ago. Rosie's real calm. "She'll take care of you." Fletcher swung up onto his own horse, a large gelding named Buck. "We'll take it slow." They rode out across the pastures, Fletcher pointing out landmarks and explaining the layout of his land. He owned nearly 2,000 acres, he told her, with good water access and decent grazing. It represented everything he'd worked for since coming west. "It must have been difficult," Natalie said, "starting from nothing." "The first few years nearly broke me," Fletcher admitted. "There were times I thought about giving up, going back to Missouri and admitting my father was right about me being a dreamer. But something kept me going. Stubbornness, maybe, or just not wanting to fail." "I'm glad you didn't give up." He glanced at her, something warm in his expression. "Me too." They stopped on a rise that overlooked much of the ranch, the house visible in the distance. The wind swept across the grassland, carrying the scent of earth and growing things. Natalie closed her eyes, letting it wash over her. "You're starting to look better," Fletcher observed. "Less tired. I think the air here is different, cleaner maybe, or maybe it's just that there are no memories here." She opened her eyes. "Does that make me a coward? Running away from memories makes you human. We all need a fresh start sometimes." He dismounted, then helped her down. "Can I tell you something?" "Of course. I lost someone too. Not the same way, but I understand grief. Her name was Caroline. We were supposed to get married back in Missouri. But she decided ranch life wasn't for her, decided I wasn't enough. That was 5 years ago." Natalie touched his arm gently. "I'm sorry. It hurt something fierce at the time. Felt like my whole future had been torn away. But looking back, I can see it was for the best. She would have been miserable here, and I would have been miserable trying to be someone I wasn't." He met her eyes. "What I'm trying to say is, I know what it's like to hurt, and I know it takes time to heal. So don't feel like you need to be someone you're not, or feel something you don't yet feel. Just be here and let time do its work." The kindness in his words, the understanding, made Natalie's chest ache. She'd expected so little from this arrangement, and Fletcher kept offering more. "You're a good man, Fletcher Winters. Trying to be, that's all any of us can do." That evening they sat together on the porch as the sun set, comfortable in each other's presence. Natalie felt something shift inside her, a tiny crack in the wall she'd built around her heart. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was the possibility of it, and that alone felt like a miracle. As spring deepened into early summer, Natalie found herself settling into ranch life more fully. She took over all the cooking, finding she enjoyed preparing meals for Fletcher and the hands. She began working in the vegetable garden that had been neglected, coaxing life back into the soil. The physical work was exhausting but satisfying, giving her tired hands and peaceful evenings. Fletcher continued to give her space, never pushing for more than she was ready to give. But their conversations grew longer, deeper. She learned about his childhood, his difficult relationship with his father, his love for this harsh but beautiful land. He listened when she talked about Emily, about their childhood, about the dreams her sister had never gotten to fulfill. "She wanted to be a teacher," Natalie said one night as they sat together after dinner. "She was so good with children, so patient. She would have been wonderful at it." "Tell me more about her," Fletcher said. "What did she look like?" "She had dark hair like mine, but curly where mine's straight. And she had these dimples when she smiled, and she was always smiling." She found joy in everything, even the smallest things. A pretty flower, a good book, a sunny day. She made everything better just by being there. She sounds like she was special. She was. And now she's gone, and the world is dimmer for it. Fletcher reached across the table and took her hand, the first time he'd initiated such contact. "I'm real sorry you lost her, Natalie. But I'm grateful every day that her loss didn't keep you from coming here, from giving this a chance." Natalie looked at their joined hands, his so much larger and rougher than hers, but warm and steady. "I'm starting to be grateful too." The next Sunday, Fletcher asked if she'd like to attend church in town with him. Natalie hesitated, knowing it would mean facing questions and curious stares, but she agreed. She needed to start integrating into this community if she was going to make a life here. Concordia's church was a simple white building at the edge of town. As they entered, Natalie felt the weight of dozens of eyes turning toward them. Fletcher kept a steady hand at her back, guiding her to a pew near the middle. Several people greeted him warmly, their gazes flickering curiously to Natalie. After the service, they were immediately surrounded. Mrs. Cassidy made introductions, presenting Natalie to what seemed like half the town. There was the doctor, a kind-faced man named Harrison, and his wife Martha. The school teacher, Miss Peterson, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s. The banker, Mr. Thornton, and his family, and dozens of others whose names blurred together. "So you're Fletcher's mail-order bride," Mrs. Thornton said, not unkindly but with obvious curiosity. "How are you finding Kansas?" "It's very different from Massachusetts," Natalie replied carefully, "but beautiful in its own way." "And when's the wedding?" another woman asked. Fletcher stepped in smoothly. "We're still getting to know each other. No need to rush." This caused some raised eyebrows but also nods of approval. On the ride home, Natalie thanked him for deflecting the questions. "I figured you'd get enough of those without me adding to it," he said. "Though I suppose we should talk about it eventually. The marriage, I mean." Natalie's heart skipped. "Do you want to?" "I want whatever you're ready for. But I also know people will talk if we wait too long, and I don't want your reputation damaged. So maybe we should think about at least making it official, even if we continue taking things slow in other ways." He was right, Natalie knew. The arrangement they had now, while comfortable, couldn't continue indefinitely without causing scandal. "What would you suggest?" "We could get married at the courthouse, simple and quick. And then we just keep on as we have been, getting to know each other, no pressure. The marriage would be real in the legal sense, but we'd only make it real in all the other ways when we're both ready." It was sensible, practical, and somehow that made it easier. "All right. When?" "Whenever you're comfortable. Next week, next month, you decide." Natalie thought about it as they drove home. The idea of marriage still felt strange, but Fletcher had proven himself to be patient and kind, and she was tired of the limbo, the uncertainty. "Next week," she said. "Let's do it next week." Fletcher glanced at her, surprise and something that might have been pleasure crossing his face. "You're sure?" "I am. You're right that we can't continue as we are indefinitely, and I trust you, Fletcher. That's more than I expected to find when I came here." The following Saturday, they rode into town with Miguel as their witness. The courthouse ceremony was brief and businesslike, the judge asking the required questions and having them sign the necessary papers. When it was done, Natalie was Mrs. Fletcher Winters, though she felt no different than she had an hour before. "Well," Fletcher said as they emerged into the summer sunshine, "I suppose that's that. I suppose it is." He offered his arm and she took it. They walked to the general store to pick up supplies, and Natalie noticed the storekeeper's wife eyeing her ring finger where a simple gold band now resided. Fletcher had surprised her with it that morning, nothing fancy but clearly chosen with care. "Congratulations on your marriage," the woman said. "Will you be having a party?" "Nothing like that," Fletcher replied. "We're keeping things simple." That night, back at the ranch, they shared a quiet dinner. Everything was the same as it had been before, except now there was a legal bond between them. Natalie found herself studying Fletcher across the table, this man who was now her husband in name. "What are you thinking?" he asked, catching her gaze. "That this is the strangest thing I've ever done. And yet somehow it feels right." "I'm glad," he smiled, and she noticed how it softened his features, made him look younger. "I know this isn't a conventional marriage, but I meant what I said. I'll be a good husband to you, Natalie, however you need me to be." Summer deepened across the Kansas prairie, and with it, Natalie felt herself slowly unfurling like one of the flowers in her garden. The grief was still there, probably always would be, but it no longer consumed her every waking moment. She found joy in small things again, the way Emily always had. A successful batch of bread, a foal being born in the pasture, the way Fletcher laughed at something Miguel said. Fletcher himself continued to be a steady presence, reliable as sunrise. He worked hard from dawn to dusk, but always made time to share meals with her, to sit on the porch in the evening and talk. He never pushed for more than she was ready to give, but Natalie found herself wanting to give more. She noticed things about him. The way he was gentle with animals, even the stubborn ones. How he always washed up carefully before coming to dinner, respecting the effort she put into cooking. The way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. The quiet strength in everything he did. One evening in mid-July, a storm rolled across the prairie with startling speed. Lightning split the sky and thunder rattled the windows. Natalie had always loved storms back home, but this was something else entirely, wild and powerful and slightly frightening. She was standing at the window watching it when Fletcher came to stand beside her. "First prairie storm. It's incredible, terrifying but incredible. They can be dangerous, but also beautiful." He stood close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "Kind of like life out here in general." Natalie turned to look at him and found his eyes already on her. Something passed between them, a shift in the air that had nothing to do with the storm. Her breath caught. "Natalie," Fletcher said quietly, "I need to tell you something." "What is it?" "I'm starting to have feelings for you. Real feelings, not just respect or friendship. And I know that might not be what you want to hear, given our arrangement, but I can't keep pretending I don't feel it." Her heart hammered in her chest. "Fletcher, I do not know what to say." "You don't have to say anything. I just needed to be honest. I can keep those feelings to myself if you're not ready, if you never will be, but I couldn't lie to you." Natalie looked at this good man who had given her nothing but kindness, who had let her grieve without judgment, who had shown her patience she'd never expected. And she realized something that both thrilled and scared her. "What if I told you I'm starting to feel something too?" The words came out barely above a whisper. Fletcher's expression transformed, hope lighting his features. "Are you saying what I think you are saying? I'm saying that when you're gone during the day, I miss you. I'm saying that I look forward to our evenings together more than anything else. I'm saying that somewhere along the way, you became more than just the man I married out of necessity." She took a deep breath. "I'm saying I think I'm falling in love with you, Fletcher Winters." He cupped her face gently in his hands, his thumbs brushing her cheekbones. "Can I kiss you?" "Yes," she breathed. His lips met hers softly, tentatively, as if she were something precious that might break. Natalie melted into him, her hands coming up to rest on his chest. The kiss was sweet and careful and full of promise. When they pulled apart, both were breathing hard. "I've wanted to do that for weeks," Fletcher admitted. "Why didn't you?" "Because I wanted you to be ready, wanted it to be real when it happened." He rested his forehead against hers. "Is this real, Natalie?" "It's real. I'm terrified, but it's real." That night marked a turning point. They still kept to their separate rooms, but the walls between them had come down. Fletcher began to openly show his affection, taking her hand as they walked, kissing her goodbye before heading out to work, pulling her close on the porch swing in the evenings. Natalie found herself opening up more, sharing not just about Emily but about her fears and hopes for the future. Fletcher listened to all of it, offering comfort when she needed it and space when she needed that instead. "I think Emily would have liked you," Natalie said one evening. "She always said I needed someone steady, someone who could weather my storms. I wish I could have met her. Anyone who was important to you is someone I'd want to know. Tell me more about Caroline," Natalie said. "Your almost bride." Fletcher was quiet for a moment. She was pretty and smart, but she had dreams that didn't include ranch life. She wanted parties and society and a husband who wore fine clothes and worked in an office. "I wanted this." He gestured at the land stretching around them. "We wanted different things, and there was no way to compromise on something so fundamental. You still think about her, sometimes, but not with regret anymore, not since you came. Now I just think about how if she'd said yes, I wouldn't have placed that advertisement. I wouldn't have found you, and that would have been the real tragedy." Natalie kissed him then, deep and full of feeling. "I love you," she whispered against his lips. "I didn't think I'd ever feel this way again, but I do. I love you." "I love you too, Natalie, more than I thought possible." That night when they went inside, Natalie didn't turn toward her room. Instead, she looked at Fletcher, a question in her eyes. He understood immediately, taking her hand and leading her to his room, which was now their room. They came together with tenderness and passion, making their marriage real in every sense of the word. Afterward, lying in Fletcher's arms, Natalie felt at peace for the first time since Emily's death. The grief was still there, probably always would be, but it no longer defined her. She had found love again, different from the familial love she'd had with her sister but no less powerful. "What are you thinking?" Fletcher asked, his hand tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. "That I came here running from pain, and somehow I found joy. That life is strange and unpredictable and sometimes surprisingly beautiful. I'm grateful every day that you answered my advertisement, that you gave me a chance, gave us a chance. Me too." The summer rolled on, and with it came the hard work of ranching. A drought threatened the grazing land, requiring long days of moving cattle and ensuring they had access to water. Fletcher worked himself nearly to exhaustion, coming home dusty and tired but always with a smile for Natalie. She did what she could to help, taking on more of the household management and even learning to help with some of the lighter ranch work. Miguel taught her about the cattle, patient with her city-bred ignorance. Tommy and Sam treated her with respectful friendliness, clearly pleased that their boss had found happiness. One particularly hot August afternoon, Natalie rode out to where Fletcher and Miguel were working on a fence line, bringing them cold water and sandwiches. Fletcher's face lit up when he saw her approaching. "You're a sight for sore eyes," he said, taking the canteen gratefully. "You've been out here since dawn. I thought you might need sustenance. Always do when it comes from you." He kissed her despite Miguel's presence, no longer shy about showing his affection. Miguel grinned. "You two are making the rest of us bachelors feel lonely." "Maybe you should place your own advertisement," Natalie teased. "At my age, I think I'm set in my ways." But he said it kindly, clearly happy for them. As fall approached, the ranch thrived despite the earlier drought concerns. Fletcher's careful management and hard work paid off with healthy cattle and good sales. He began talking about expanding, about building onto the house. "I'm thinking we might need more room eventually," he said one night. Natalie felt her cheeks warm. "Are you hoping for children, Only if you are. But yes, I'd like that. A family to fill this house to carry on what we're building here. I'd like that too, though I'm a little scared. Of childbirth, of being responsible for a life. We'll face it together, whatever comes. That's what marriage is, isn't it? Facing life together. In October, Natalie's hopes were confirmed when she missed her monthly courses and began feeling queasy in the mornings. Dr. Harrison, called out to the ranch on another matter, confirmed what she already suspected. She was expecting a child, due in late spring. Fletcher's reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He swept her into his arms, careful despite his joy, and kissed her breathless. A baby. We're having a baby. Are you happy? She asked, though his expression made the answer obvious. Happy doesn't begin to cover it. Terrified too, if I'm being honest, but mostly just incredibly grateful. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the fall and into winter. Natalie felt good most days, blooming with health. Fletcher became even more attentive, constantly worried she was doing too much. She found it endearing even when it was slightly annoying. Winter in Kansas proved to be harsh, with bitter cold and snow that transformed the prairie into a white wilderness. But the house was warm, and Natalie found she didn't mind being snowed in with Fletcher. They spent long evenings by the fire, reading together or just talking, making plans for the baby and the future. Boy or girl, what do you hope for? Natalie asked one such evening, her hands on her growing belly. Healthy. That's all I care about. Though I will admit, I've been imagining a little girl who looks just like you. And I've been imagining a boy with your eyes and your steadiness. Either way, they'll be loved. That's what matters most. Christmas came, and they celebrated simply but joyfully. Fletcher had carved a beautiful rocking chair for the nursery they were preparing, and Natalie had knitted a tiny blanket. Mrs. Cassidy and several other women from town had organized a quilting bee, creating a beautiful baby quilt that moved Natalie to tears. "Everyone's been so kind," she said to Fletcher. "I never expected to feel so welcomed here. You're one of us now, part of this community, and everyone can see how happy you've made me, which makes them happy too." In February, a letter arrived from Massachusetts, forwarded through several addresses before finding Natalie. It was from her aunt, her mother's sister, whom she barely knew. The woman expressed belated condolences about Emily and surprise that Natalie had moved so far away. She wrote that she was getting older and would like to reconnect with her only living niece. Natalie read the letter to Fletcher that evening. "I don't know what to do. We were never close, but she's family, the only family I have left besides you." Then write her back. Tell her about your new life, about the baby coming. Maybe she could even come visit once the little one arrives. Would you mind? Not at all. Family's important, Natalie. Even family we don't know well. And I'd like to meet someone else who knew your mother, who can tell you stories about her. So Natalie wrote back, a long letter describing her life in Kansas, her marriage, her pregnancy. She included an invitation to visit, though she wasn't sure it would be accepted given the distance and her aunt's age. Spring arrived gradually, the snow melting and giving way to green grass and wildflowers. Natalie's belly grew large, and she slowed down despite her desire to keep working. Fletcher hovered, driving her crazy with concern but also making her feel cherished beyond measure. In early May, the labor pains began. Fletcher rode hard for town to fetch Dr. Harrison while Mrs. Cassidy, who had been staying at the ranch in anticipation, helped Natalie prepare. The labor was long and difficult, testing Natalie's strength and resolve. But Fletcher never left her side, holding her hand through every contraction, murmuring encouragement. "You can do this," he kept saying. "You're the strongest person I know." Finally, as dawn broke over the prairie, a baby's cry filled the room. Dr. Harrison announced, "It's a boy. A healthy, strong boy." Fletcher's face was wet with tears as the doctor placed the baby in Natalie's arms. She looked down at the tiny face, the dark hair, the perfect little features, and felt her heart expand to hold yet more love. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "We've been waiting for you." "He's perfect," Fletcher said, his voice rough with emotion. "You're both perfect." They named him William Fletcher Winters, calling him Will. He had Fletcher's eyes and what would clearly be Natalie's dark hair. From the start, he was a good baby, sleeping and eating well, seeming content with his place in the world. Fletcher proved to be a devoted father, rising in the night to help with feedings, spending every spare moment with his son. Natalie would often find them together, Fletcher talking softly to Will about the ranch, about the cattle, about all the things they'd do together when Will was older. "You're going to make him a ranch hand before he can walk," Natalie teased. "Just preparing him for his inheritance. This will all be his someday, this land and everything we've built. I want him to love it the way I do." In June, to Natalie's surprise, her Aunt Margaret arrived from Massachusetts. She was a small, energetic woman in her 60s who immediately took to ranch life with unexpected enthusiasm. "I should have come west years ago," Margaret declared. "Why did I waste all that time in that cramped house in Boston?" She doted on baby Will and regaled Natalie with stories about her mother, filling in gaps Natalie had never known existed. It turned out Margaret had wanted to go west herself as a young woman but had been forbidden by her father. Now, widowed and with nothing tying her to Massachusetts, she made a surprising announcement. "I'd like to stay if you'll have me. Not in your house. I wouldn't impose like that, but perhaps I could rent a place in town. Help with the baby, become part of your lives properly." Natalie looked at Fletcher, who nodded with a smile. "We'd love that, Aunt Margaret, truly." So Margaret settled in Concordia, renting rooms above the general store and becoming a fixture in town. She helped with Will, taught Natalie family recipes, and generally brought an additional sense of family that enriched all their lives. As summer progressed, the ranch continued to prosper. Fletcher hired 2 more hands, and Miguel became a full partner in the operation. Plans for expanding the house went forward, adding a proper nursery and a guest room for Margaret's visits. One evening in late July, almost exactly 2 years after Natalie had arrived in Concordia, she and Fletcher sat on the porch swing, Will asleep in Natalie's arms. The sunset painted the sky in brilliant colors, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of grass and wildflowers. "You ever regret it?" Fletcher asked. "Leaving Massachusetts, taking a chance on a stranger?" Natalie looked at him, at this man who had given her time to heal, who had shown her patience and kindness, who had loved her through grief and back into joy. "Not for a single moment. You gave me a new life, Fletcher. A better life than I ever imagined. You gave me one too. I was just existing before, working and surviving but not really living. You changed everything. We changed everything together." She leaned against his shoulder, careful not to wake Will. "This life we've built, this family, it's more than I deserve." "It's exactly what you deserve, what we both deserve." He kissed her temple. "I love you, Natalie Winters, more every day, and I love you." The years that followed brought more children, 2 more boys and finally a girl who Fletcher insisted had Natalie's eyes. The ranch continued to grow and prosper, becoming one of the most successful operations in the county. Miguel eventually married a widow from town, and they built a house on the ranch property, becoming even more integral to the operation. Aunt Margaret lived to see all 4 grandchildren, passing peacefully in her sleep at the age of 73. She died happy, having found in her final years the adventure and family she'd always wanted. As the children grew, Natalie made sure they knew about Emily, keeping her sister's memory alive through stories. She wanted them to understand that joy and grief could coexist, that love lost didn't mean you couldn't find love again. On their 15th wedding anniversary, Fletcher presented Natalie with a beautiful locket containing tiny portraits of their 4 children. "So you can carry them with you always, the way you carried Emily in your heart all those years ago." Natalie traced the delicate metalwork with her finger, touched beyond words. "You understand me so completely. How did I get so lucky? We both got lucky. The day you stepped off that stagecoach was the best day of my life, though I didn't know it then. I was so lost then, so broken. And I was honored to help you find yourself again, to love you while you healed." He pulled her close. "You know what the best part is?" "What?" "We get to keep doing this. Loving each other, building this life together, watching our children grow. We get years and years more of this happiness." And they did. Through good times and hard, through drought and plenty, through the joys of grandchildren, and the inevitable losses that come with long life, Fletcher and Natalie Winters built something that lasted. Their love story, which began with grief and patience, became a foundation strong enough to support not just them but generations to come. The ranch house, expanded and improved over the years, filled with the sounds of children and eventually grandchildren. Will took over operations when Fletcher decided to step back, running the ranch with the same careful attention his father had shown. The other children found their own paths, but all remained close, drawn back by the love that permeated every corner of that Kansas prairie homestead. In their later years, Fletcher and Natalie would sit on that same porch where they'd spent so many evenings, watching the sunset paint the sky. They'd hold hands, these 2 people who had taken a chance on each other, who had found love in the midst of loss, who had built something beautiful out of broken pieces. "You remember that first day?" Natalie would ask. "When I stepped off that stagecoach looking like death itself? I remember thinking you were the saddest person I'd ever seen, and the most beautiful. Liar. I was a mess. A beautiful mess, and I knew even then that you were going to change my life. We changed each other's lives. That's what love does, I think. It transforms us." Fletcher would pull her closer and they'd sit in comfortable silence, 2 hearts that had found their home in each other. The prairie stretched endless around them, wild and beautiful and free, just like the life they'd built together. Their story became legend in Concordia, the tale of the mail-order bride who arrived with grief, and the rancher who gave her time to heal. Young couples would hear it and take hope, understanding that love doesn't always arrive in a rush of passion, that sometimes the deepest love grows slowly, patiently, from seeds of kindness and respect. And on quiet nights, when the wind swept across the Kansas plains, carrying with it the whispered stories of all who had lived and loved on that land, the story of Fletcher and Natalie Winters would be there, a testament to the power of patience, the beauty of second chances, and the enduring strength of a love built on the foundation of understanding and time.